Welcome to Leading with Purpose, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you become the leader you aspire to be. Join us on a journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and inspiration as we explore the world of leadership and personal growth. In each episode, we will explore the art and science of effective leadership, bringing you insights, stories, and strategies from experts and thought leaders across various industries. And now your hosts, Dawn Marie Bornhammer, Maisha B. Hoy, Janelle E. Taylor, and Dr. Sharon H. Porter. Welcome to Leading with Purpose, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you become the leader you aspire to be as you lead, empower, inspire, and achieve. I am Dr. Sharon H. Porter, Editor-in-Chief of Vision and Purpose Lifestyle Magazine.
Hi, everyone. I am Maisha Hoy, CEO of BSHG, which manages customer first marketing, Maisha'sLemonadeStand.com, and Cuba.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dawn Bornhammer. I'm the founder and chief impact officer for Mission Inspired Consulting.
And we are truly excited to welcome Ms. Luann Horobin. She is a native of Alberta, Canada. She is one of 1,600 International Coaching Federation Master Coaches, executive and leadership coach, career accelerator, transformational consultant, teacher, and facilitator. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be here, and it's really an honor.
Absolutely. So I really want to start as looking at all of your background and so many amazing things that you cover. You talk a lot about mindsets, which I love. You actually have a course entitled Mastering Your Mindset, Steps to Love Your Life. And I also saw you state mindset controls how we give the meaning to our circumstances, which determine the outcomes of our relationships and our life. My question is, how does our mindset influence the way we interpret and give meaning to our interactions and experiences?
That's a great question. And I think one of my favorite aspects of it, I would actually call that perspective. And our perspective actually is driven by our values and beliefs, which originate within our mindset. It's driven by the subconscious mind. And so how we see a situation is really how we experience that situation, but also then it determines the meaning of that, which determines how we continue to act through it. So you can see that it's kind of an interdependency of beliefs and values that all stem from within our mindset and our subconscious mind that's running those programs. I think it's running them more automatically than we really recognize. As a matter of fact, if I could just throw a little information in there, there's plenty of different statistics. I'm just going to kind of simplify them. And that is that the subconscious mind runs at 90% of our mind and the conscious mind runs at 10%. So our subconscious mind and our beliefs are constantly filtering how we experience it. So when we work with that, we can actually influence change by changing those very components.
I really love that because I really believe when you talk about the influences of your mindset and changing and all of that, I really believe that a lot of times it is part of your experiences and your upbringing and all of those things, those beliefs that you talked about. Those can stem from childhood even, and so you have those mindsets that have been instilled in you and you still carry those on even as an adult and a professional.
It's so very true. And it's often something that occurred when we were in our early years that was just emotionally impacting. And what happens is it impacts us. And even unknowingly, we will say something to ourselves like, I'll never do that again, or I'll never have that experience again, something of that nature. And that becomes a deeply guarded belief in the subconscious mind, which literally drives us. And this is the really fascinating part to me, is that I mean, if our beliefs sort of had these red flags on them that said, I'm a limiting belief, we would recognize them easily. And we
Absolutely.
would be able to just say, oh, well, then I'm not going to really be drawn into it. But they're very strategic. They actually show up as a strategy. And we really think that we're doing something that's good for ourselves, but really we're actually limiting ourselves when we follow those little nudges. And it's interesting because I was just having this conversation recently with someone I was working with about resistance, because resistance is so subtle that it's inside of us and it doesn't even really tell us often. I mean, if we consciously know what we're resisting, we can address it. But it's when that resistance comes in and we don't even know why we're not doing something. We just know we can't do it. And that's the subconscious mind. But there are ways of getting to that and working with that that are probably much simpler than one might think.
Wow.
But they are simpler to understand, I think, than one might think sometimes.
Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you.
I'm glad you said that it's simple to understand once you understand it, because when I saw your bio, I was like, what is she talking about? So I understand neuroscience as a science. I understand transformation. We talk to many leaders who help people transform their lives. But if you could put those two together and let me understand what neuroscience transformation is, I would really appreciate it.
I love talking about this. So neuroscience, it's science based, actually, in that it's an understanding of how the mind works and how the whole process works, from beliefs through to perception to how we interpret that, which then drives our actions. And it's actually, although it's stimulated by either probably a visual or an auditory or a kinesthetic experience or feeling, it's stimulated by something, but it becomes actually literally a chemistry process where it triggers certain parts of the brain that have different chemistry to them. So for example, of course, when something triggers a fear, that's the cortisol reaction that leads to a whole series of reactions and interactions type of thing. And the endorphins actually create a creative experience where this is where we can make decision making. So sometimes understanding that and understanding how the brain chemistry works, it actually helps us to change that chemistry from a fear into a state where we can be more in a place of managing our state. We're less affected by triggers and we recognize them more. So that's the neuroscience part of it. Transformation is, and I'm very careful about using this term. Transformation is where we have an experience. We actually change our whole perspective and how we carry out our actions, our thoughts. It's like we have a different presence, and we have that different presence because we start to recognize the ways of managing the beliefs as they show up, and we actually see through them. It's kind of like when you face something and you face the truth, it diffuses it. It just no longer has a grip. And so it's science-based processes that lead to that transformation, which really are a new experience, and you feel like a new self. I've said myself, I really didn't realize how stressed I was until I wasn't. And I've heard many people say things similar to that. I didn't realize how much this was consuming me. This is one of the exercises we do, is we look at, like, how much time do you think you spend thinking about this thing that is going on that you're wanting to change? It's really interesting how consuming it is in our mind, but that's because it is driving us. And then once we recognize, we think, okay, I know how to turn that around now. It's like so freeing. Does that help you understand that?
Yes. part. I'm nodding my head because I'm like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Even doing this podcast, even doing podcasts with Dr. Sharon for the last year and a half, I didn't think I could do it. I kept
Yeah.
coming on with butterflies and nervousness and now
Yes.
it's like, okay, we got this. I know how to do it. So I'm assuming that's part of that neuroscience transformation that I myself personally went through.
Yes, because there would be a change in how you are interpreting the triggers. Actually, through some of those science-based processes, you can actually become literally neutral to triggers. And it's amazing how people, this is also a fun part of this, in that it's not like like some things you'll have a physical evidence. Like if you have surgery, you have a scar. But with this, you don't really have a physical evidence. You typically, people's expressions get lighter, their energy gets lighter. They change their interactions. And I've often heard people say, "What have you done? Like, what have you done?" But what's interesting is when I'm working with someone and they say, so I'll just give an example of someone I worked with, and they hadn't spoken with their father for many years. I think it was 8 years. And they were wanting to overcome some of their beliefs about various relationships, but that was one of them that was quite bothersome. And so as we worked with these processes, the next time he came, he said, I was just sitting there on Sunday and I decided, I don't really know why I'm not calling my dad. And he said, I don't really have a good reason. I can't really think of why I'm not really calling him. So he called his father and he said, his father was absolutely elated. So they made amends. And he said, I put all this effort into this for so many years. And he said, and in that moment, it was just so easy. And he said, all that other stuff, I'm going to call it stuff, didn't even make sense anymore. And that's what sometimes people say. They'll have someone say to them, like, what have you done?
Yeah, I completely get it. When I saw, like I said, when I saw who was on going to be on, I was like, oh my God, I wish I could have the whole hour to myself, but I can't. So I'm gonna let let Dawn ask the next question, and I'll come back to another question I have about what I saw.
Okay. Awesome. Dawn.
So I just love this conversation. You are speaking about so many things that I find myself speaking about day in and day out. So my question for you is an extension of some of the terminology that you've used up to this point. So I would love to talk about the perception of stress and how reframing your perception of stress can really be a catalyst for growth for an individual.
Mm-hmm. So typically, where we have a perception of stress, there's a gap between what I want to do and what I feel I'm capable of doing, or there's probably a fear of some sort that is actually running. And sometimes it's really hard to identify. So when we have stress, we typically have some type of a duality. It's like the foot on the gas and the foot on the brakes. And you can imagine if that was going on in the car, that probably wouldn't really work very well. It would probably wear out a car part. And so it's the same thing for us as humans. When we have stress, because the subconscious mind runs like 90% of our consciousness, it also runs our body. And that means that those fear triggers of cortisol are running through our body. And cortisol has the effect of literally, I don't know, kind of constricting your veins. Like it's a constrictor. It's not an expander like endorphins are. And so this is why people get sore shoulders or sore jaws or headaches, because literally their veins and how they would typically function is restricted. It's tightness. And so when we understand that what I'm perceiving is, I guess I'm going to describe this as a concept of when we have a fear, it's really actually a gift, because a fear will actually direct us exactly to what an issue is. It's like it's like an arrow, like a road sign. Go down this path and you will find an answer that will release you of that fear. And so we look at, part of our work is to recognize, what is that fear? And then what is it that we can do to read? What's the trigger? Is it visual, auditory, kinesthetic? And from there, we're able to, there's various methods of working with that can reduce that trigger. And when you see those situations again, it's almost, I don't know, it's almost amusing to ourselves to see, oh my, I spent all this time in a state over something that I can really manage, and actually not too difficult, in not too difficult of a way, really kind of get on top of it. So it's very freeing. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I think it's interesting to think about your example in reference to triggers. When I think about stress and the opportunity to not label it as good or bad so much as to recognize that it means we care, right? And it's like, okay, I'm actually a little bit, I can feel this feeling, and it's because I care, not because I'm not confident, but it's because I want to do well. And even if it's the mindset around reframing that thought to say, I have to trust that I've done everything I can do up to this point because we're going live and here we are, or I'm standing on stage, or I'm speaking to this audience or doing this presentation, but also thinking about, as you just referenced, those triggers and recognizing they're just that, they're information. So if we can perceive those triggers as information, what am I meant to learn from what is happening right now? And you just described the beginning of a process to, work with that data point, right? That information to help empower someone to recognize that they are capable of moving through whatever that trigger is for them. Yes. And so perception plays a large role in everything that you're describing. So definitely.
Perception does play a huge role. Sorry, did I cut you off?
No.
Oh, okay. So perception plays a huge role. And in that particular kind of situation, when we have stress about something we're wanting to do, but we're also kind of terrified of it, one of the ways we can work with that is to say, oh, wow, I made it here. I'm ready. Like I'm ready. And when we say I'm ready, and how can this be as good as I ever imagined it? As soon as I ask a question will actually change a brain chemistry. And so a question will actually change our energy. So there's several questions, depending on what the situation would be, that you can ask. And so there's two parts to that. And I love your explanation of that perspective, because that's awesome. So congratulations, we're doing something new. This is what I've wanted to do. And the question triggers actually the endorphins. It actually triggers the other part of the brain. So you can say, and this is my time to shine. If I ever wanted to shine, like, go for it.
Beautiful. And it's such a beautiful reminder that words matter, and the words we say to ourselves can be really empowering. So thank you.
That is so true. Words have actually got visual associations with them. And that, so that's why just a word can be such a trigger. But there's also ways of working with those as well.
Definitely.
Yes, that's a great question.
Thank you.
So, Luann, you have so many amazing courses. I was browsing through all of your the libraries of courses, and one really intrigued me, and I hope that you can share a little bit about this one. It was the 4 steps to go from fed up to fired up. I love that. Can you just give us a little insight on that course?
Okay, the course from fed up to fired up describes it works with the process of when we're really fed up and we just really can't believe in what we're doing. And I guess I would describe it as a feeling of like the mountain is bigger than me. And so what that course does is it turns that perception of the mountain is bigger to me to, first of all, recognizing really what is the mountain, also recognizing what is our strengths, but also looking at what is the way that I can use this gap or this mountain to actually accelerate, like to be fired up, because because obstacles are really bridges. And it actually walks through the 4 steps with a few processes as well to help a person reduce the stress and actually visualize what is it going to be like on the top of that mountain. And that's, to allow you to get to fired up. So some brain chemistry, some body chemistry. So that you can really see that obstacles are actually bridges.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. You always hear obstacles or opportunities, but I think it's more vivid when you say they're bridges because it leads to something.
Yes.
And that something could be something positive. So I love that.
Yes. They're exactly like a treasure map. They're giving you a clue to the treasure. And when you look at it as a clue, when you say, oh, you know what, this is telling me something. This is actually showing me the exact path to what I want. Yeah. Which, how luckier can we get than that?
I love it. I love it. Talk about switching your mindset. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're back to Maisha and Neuroscience Transformation 101.
Yes.
I saw something else that you wrote up, your perspective handout, and it was talking about using your neural pathways to change your perception, or it could have been the vice versa. I'm not sure. Could you explain what that means and how our neural pathways have the ability to change our perspective of life?
Yeah, that's another great question. So, so with our neural pathways, so what we see is going to be what we experience, because that's how we interpreted it. So when we see something, we interpret it a certain way. So that is what our experience is. And so it's in a nutshell, when we see something, literally the brain kind of says, the last time I saw this, what did I see next? That's a neural pathway. That's like the neural pathway. It's like the road sign that says, the last time I was at this intersection, I had to go left to get to where I wanted. So every time it sees that thing, it will go left. And so in that sense, it's constant. The mindset is like constant predicting and correcting, right? And so that's where perspective works with, so how do I change the meaning of what I'm seeing? And one of the tools that I use a lot of is questions, because they're so valuable to customize to a specific situation. But one question that a person can ask is, how is this exactly perfect? When we see something that's not feeling too perfect at the moment, you can ask ourselves, how is this exactly perfect? Which prompts the subconscious mind to go look for an answer. Perfect refers to like a bigger vision. So that means instead of going left the old way, the neural pathway is now going to go right and look for something that is different. And so when we say, how is this exactly perfect? I might be aligned with, let's say, one of my bigger visions or my bigger goals. So there's where I'm going to take a different neural pathway towards my vision, rather than the old pathway that was kind of the stressed out version. Does that kind of put that into a nutshell? Did that?
No, you should see all my notes. Dr. Sharon and Dawn know I have so many notes, and I write this up and I post it on my own blog. But it makes perfect sense, because we all go through things the your your message is positive, but your message is also science, and that's like two things that I love. It just seems like if we switch our words, switch our mindset, look at things differently, then we're doing all this transformation that you're talking about. So I am absolutely jazzed talking to
Yes.
you.
And I want to just clarify something a little bit, because it's a little bit more than just positive thinking as we know it. Because sometimes positive thinking as we know it can be almost denying something that is present.
That's true.
Whereas when I'm saying, how is this perfect? I'm not denying what's present. I'm taking in all of what is here. And I'm saying, how is all of this together unfolding perfectly towards my higher vision? So I'm really embracing everything that's here. When I turn an obstacle into, a bridge, I'm taking all the aspects of that, because every aspect of that obstacle is a clue. It's like a clue on the treasure map. So I don't want to miss any one of them. And in that sense, when I turn that into like a different neural pathway, or I turn it into a different perspective and a different brain chemistry, I've actually taken all of it. I didn't leave anything behind.
I get it. I think you've created a neural pathway for me just in this conversation. So I cannot wait to apply some of this in my life.
Awesome. That's fabulous. It's pretty exciting, I think.
It's
And
very
so I'm
exciting.
excited to hear you say that.
Yes. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
So I think one of the beautiful things about what you just walked us through is the opportunity for us to learn through contrast at times, right? The opportunity to
Yes.
be an observer, recognize the things that we are meant to learn, the pieces we're meant to pick up, and what we choose to keep and what we choose to release, and then we move potentially in a new direction with new information. And I would love to tie what you're describing to leadership and leadership presence. What does it look like for some of maybe your clients or those that you serve as they look around their team and they say, my charge is to lead these individuals, and there's some work we need to do here, right? Whether it's individual, collective, culture, and there is some reimagining and some rethinking and some perspective taking that needs to occur in order to move in the direction of that desirable future. Can you talk to us a little bit about maybe how you would go about bridging those concepts for a leader who recognizes that they desire a stronger leadership presence and a more connected team?
Also a really good question. So one of the things that I work with is vertical development, which is a little bit different than horizontal development. And so typically what I would work with in a conversation of that nature would be to look at what aspect of this do you feel works really well for you as an individual, as for the leader, and what aspect of this would you like to work better? Because all of us have those self-protective strategies about certain things that we encounter that are just harder than other things that we encounter. And the difference between horizontal development is where horizontal development is like when I learn, I call it, I learn stuff. I can go and I can Google this, and then what are the 5 theories for this, and what are the 7 ways of dealing with that, and so on and so forth. Like I can, that's like adding knowledge, which is kind of like, it's kind of like adding an app on your phone. There's something that I can access. But vertical development is where I'm going to think about this differently. There is this saying that I don't really have a problem. I just have a decision to make, right? I have a different decision to make. I have a different perspective. And so we look at the programming and the beliefs and what are the perceptions that person is having to be able to create a different experience and an easier way for them. In that sense, they can usually get much more connected to other people as they work through that process, because those processes are usually limiting beliefs, always have us focus on ourselves. They're not we oriented. They're not we oriented, they're I oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And so vertical development helps us change that perspective to see how can I adjust the beliefs I have about this situation to become more we oriented. And it ends up, and it has a lot of ripple effects. When we work with one area, we tend to notice a lot of benefits in other areas as well.
No, I love that. And talking about strengthening the mindset and the heart set and the perspective of the leader, first and foremost, and then watching that
Yes.
ripple effect in their relationships, in their interactions, in the dynamics that are going to inevitably be affected by the way in which they show up each and every day, especially as they mirror and model certain ways of being inside of a group environment.
Absolutely. And in those, in that discussion about what is the perception of what's difficult about this, or what's not really working that well, and what would you like to work better, there will be those self-limiting strategies that always come to surface. But what's really interesting, and it's perception again, how did you perceive this? What did you perceive this interaction to mean? And sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, I don't know why I was even thinking that, because when I thought about it the next time around, it's like, that was about me. That wasn't really about my group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it reflects some of the other leaders we've interviewed recently that have talked a lot about starting with the leader and then the ripple effect that the team will benefit from. So it definitely echoes some things that we've been chatting about recently. So thank you.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, Luann. So you said something, I think in Maisa's response that really stuck out for me. You said what we see is what we experience. And that made me think of the red car theory. Not sure if you're familiar with that. Like you buy a red car or a car, and then you begin to start seeing it all over, right? Not that it wasn't there before, but now that you are aware,
that's
you start
exactly
seeing
correct.
that. So that's
So
what
true.
that made me think of.
Oh, that's true.
Yes. So I want you to break it down more specifically as it relates to the work that you do, because I thought that was such a profound statement, because it's so true. When we are aware of things around us, that becomes our experience. So can you just break it down just a little more based on the work that you do?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just gonna collect my thoughts for a second here. I think that you know, our beliefs and our perceptions are evident everywhere in our environment, because that's the evidence we have of our beliefs is our outside environment. And our outside experience is evidence of how we're interacting with our beliefs. And so you're exactly correct. When you see the red car, once you own the red car, you see all the red cars you never saw before. That's because you were, I call it autopilot. When we're run by beliefs, we're just running on autopilot, and we're just kind of responding and reacting to things. When we stop and take a look at the inventory around us, which is like buying the red car,
Mm-hmm.
we start thinking, oh, it's like that saying of how you do anything is how you do everything. And then you start seeing, oh, I see it here, I see it here. Whereas prior to that, we didn't really recognize that. It's because we have a new perception, but we also have a new trigger and a new pathway, and we will see that, which means that once we continue to do this work more, our awareness becomes, put it this way, we have higher, longer highs and higher, shorter lows,
Mhm.
because we're able to manage the triggers that come up. Did I answer your question?
You did, and I appreciate that. Yes, absolutely. And I
Mhm.
love that. Because I think awareness is the key there.
I would agree with you, because that's one of the ways that we understand what our beliefs are, is just by looking at what's happening in our outside world,
Absolutely.
because they don't show up and tell us, by the way, did you know that you're a little closed off here? Or, and sometimes that's why it's so surprising when people give us feedback and we're thinking, well, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah.
And that's
Thank
true.
you.
We didn't know about it because it's running us.
Yes.
So we just become aware so that we can recognize, oh yeah, that's a trigger. And sometimes as people do this work, they start recognizing what those events were that they don't even remember as a child, when they started saying, I'll never do this, or I won't ever do that, or this is not possible, type of thing. And they'll say, well, you know what, actually it is.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you. That's a great question.
Okay, so my sister is experiencing a career transition after I think 5, 6 years of working at the same job. They were told that this is a government contract, they lost a contract. So I know you work with a lot of career transitioners and you really helped a lot of them. So I'm just wondering, what would you say to my sisters and others who are going through a big change in this part of their lives that they did not expect?
Well, that's a good one. I can relate to that one, actually. I think the first thing is looking at how do I go forward from here? It's what do I have? So one of the things that happens when we have this very sudden change, and career is one example, but it can happen in other parts of life, like relationships, can happen in other areas of work. It can happen actually almost any time. But when a change like career happens, the first thing to remember is that it doesn't take away any of our value, and it doesn't take away any of our knowledge, and it doesn't take away any of our ability to perform in another setting. It's simply like and I don't want to undermine the process because it's a challenging process, but we have everything within us. Nothing within us was affected. It's the outside part of us that was affected. And it's a matter of moving what we have within us to a new and better way of delivering that. In a nutshell.
That's what I figured you would say. Because this whole
Yes.
conversation is really a mindset change. It's really understanding who we are, and that what the
Yes.
outside does to us doesn't affect what we can do.
We're not determined by our outside world.
Right.
Our path is not determined. Our life is not determined. We are impacted by our outside world. Absolutely. But we are not determined by our outside world. And the other thing that often that can be helpful in the job search is knowing that, if we were to, let's say, look at career, let's say as a timeline, let's say the timeline is like this long, and we have X number of years, however many years go in this timeline. This event is just this part of this much of the timeline. Although it feels like this much, it really is this much, and it will always be resolved. It is always resolved. I don't think I've worked with anyone who stayed unemployed, but it's an uncomfortable feeling. So I really don't want to be sounding like I'm undermining it. I just know that there is a process, and when we use the process, it's kind of like it's a prompting to new tools. And one of the things that I think I often hear my clients say is that they turned the worst part of their life into the best part, because they started looking at, like, what is it that I could do even better? If I wanted to find, like something that I like even more, what would that look like? Because we definitely have the capacity to do that.
Absolutely. I can't wait to share this with my sister and everyone at her job that's going through a career transition
Yes.
at this point. Thank you
Yes.
so
And
much.
it 100% is possible. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, I could go on forever on that one, so I'll just be quiet.
So as someone who went through a career transition last year, I appreciate your response. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're most welcome.
And I appreciate wholeheartedly the earlier offering of obstacles or bridges, because I recognize that I could never have imagined the bridge that I was crossing this time last year. And I'm so grateful to be standing on the other side of it and being able to look back and reflect on it. But I do remember that initial feeling, and it does feel some kind of way for folks, especially when they poured their heart and soul into the business that they were a part of. And so it does take a moment of grief almost, right, to move forward and then to decide how you're going to proceed with your mindset, your heart set, and what you're going to do next.
Yes, I think it's so important to remember that what you have something that someone needs. One of the questions I always suggest people think about is, who needs to know what I've already learned? Because that is their audience. That's the people that they want to be speaking to. And they've made someone's business more successful by what they've contributed. And so they will do that again. It's just finding, and I always encourage people to think of, when you think of your role, you think of all the things that you liked about it, but also think about, what is it you would like to be a little bit better? And keep that in mind, because this is a chance for you to get that little bit better. No. Or a lot better, whichever you choose.
Yeah, and that's actually how I made my decision on what was next for me, based on answering a very similar question for myself. So I'm grateful for that.
Yes.
My last question for you really is centered around our emerging leaders. We do attract, as listeners, quite a few emerging leaders, individuals that are stepping into their leadership journey. And I'd like to think a little bit about what we would say to them. If there's something you could offer them as a little tip or a tidbit around starting their journey and really embodying self-leadership as it relates to kind of working on yourself alongside of developing your team or your leadership style. Is there something that you could offer our audience today that is related to that self-leadership space that could be a great tool in their toolkit for the future?
Well, I always suggest, just don't go it alone. Find a mentor, or find someone who you can relate to, that you can discuss things with, and that can offer guidance on your path, because you'll be encountering so many things that are really brand new, that it's important to have a really good circle around you, but specifically having a mentor or a coach, someone that you can really get into the weeds with about what's going on, is a fabulous tool. Because sometimes when we're encountering a lot of really new experiences, it can actually affect our confidence, because there's so many new things, and it's like there's only so many days that you can kind of, I don't know, navigate the swamp without feeling like, is this really what I was going to do? Without giving yourself some type of a question. So I would suggest that. I also would suggest it's like, be prepared and be your own best friend. Always remember that, think of the things that you say to yourself, and make sure that what you say to yourself is kind, because it will just help you manage all of those things from a different perspective and a different mindset.
I love that, thinking about your coach as your partner in thinking, as the opportunity to reflect back to you how far you've come, maybe someone that helps you celebrate your accomplishments. Yes. Sometimes we don't take the time to celebrate And so having a partner in thinking, but also having someone that you can celebrate those moments with, and they can hold you accountable to the things you say to yourself, really
Yes,
surrounding yourself with those good people. So it's a
yes,
great
that's
reminder.
true. It's so true to have that having that person is very important. And I guess I would add one more thing. Always make sure that you have something in your either in your process or your day, your routine that you really, really enjoy, because that refreshes you and rejuvenates you, and it actually it breaks the burnout cycle. So make sure you regularly do that. And as you mentioned, celebrate and reward as well.
Beautiful. Thank
That's a
you.
key part.
Oh my goodness, we have just experienced Luann's masterclass. I would have you to know I appreciate all your insight, all of your expertise, and just the information that you have imparted on our listeners and viewers. So, Luann, if you would take this time to just share your information, where can people contact you? Where can they connect with you and learn more about the amazing work that you are doing? Please take the time to do that.
Oh, well, thank you. I think the best way to reach me right now is LinkedIn, because I'm on there quite a bit, pretty frequently. And it's a great way to just connect and we can have a conversation. I do offer a mindset alignment call just to help people understand something if they've got something they want to work with and maybe it's a little bit perplexing. I offer one a free mindset alignment call as well. If that's of interest. But to connect with me on LinkedIn is the best way. And from there, I have different resources that I could share, depending on what the interest is that the person has.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we also want to thank our listeners and our viewers for joining another episode of Leading with Purpose podcast today. Again, I am Dr. Sharon H. Porter.
And I am Maisha Bihoy.
And I'm Dawn Bornheimer. As you navigate your leadership journey, please remember that it is not just leading with purpose as a philosophy, but it is a deep commitment to leading with impact.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it. Please like it. Please share with your network. And don't forget to subscribe so you will never miss an opportunity to explore the intersection of leadership and purpose.
Continue to lead, empower, inspire, and achieve.
And until next time, lead with passion, lead with a positive intention, and by all means, lead with purpose.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love that.
Thank you for joining the Leading with Purpose podcast. Please join us every Monday for a new episode.